Hey guys, how is everybody doing? Doing well myself. I had an idea for a video. I've been thinking about this, so I thought I'd just go ahead and do this video. I wanted to show you about the differences in the older Oldsmobile engine mounting versus the later model that a lot more people are familiar with. Now, you've seen that 63 Olds I've been working on and off, and I've mentioned, I guess, more than once that it's probably going to have another engine put in it. I don't think that one is going to be savable cheaply. Now that's something important, because you can rebuild any engine unless it's just cracked into pieces, but that one, those tend to be quite expensive to rebuild properly, especially if you got to bore it and you got to put new pistons in it. So those of you who've been following along, you know that while I try to do things, mechanically, I try to do them well, and I don't advocate taking the cheap way out. That may be a little bit above the budget trying to rebuild that engine, so I just warn you ahead of time that it may end up being that we've got to put another kind of engine in it. Now, that said, let's make one thing clear. I'm going to do everything possible to never put a Chevrolet engine into that Oldsmobile. Now, I won't go as far as saying never. If I could find a LS engine and the support system to run it, I'd consider it, because those are a great engine. But otherwise, no. And I know Chevy guys can take offense to that. Somebody always takes offense to something I do on the videos anyway, but who cares? So I wanted to show you about those, why that, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. I wanted to kind of explain more in detail about why that it's not just a cut and dried thing to swap engines in those. So let's go ahead. I think I've got a good Sharpie here somewhere. I'm going to draw out on a piece of paper here. I'm going to do some drawing. And we're going to label up here, we're going to label that car 1963 Olds 394. And then down below we're going to do the second one. We're going to say it's a 1966 Olds 425. And we'll say both of these are in a B body. That's what that car is. A C body is like a 98. Like an Olds is 98. That one's an 88. An Olds 88. So we're going to have an engine. Well, let's just for simplicity's sake, let's have two frame rails. Kind of go in here. Yes, I know they're not the same size. Two frame rails here. This jogging over deal. This is where it jogs over, kind of by the wheels. And then we're going to have a cross member right here. Cross member here, same place, and then we're going to have, now this is not going to be to scale necessarily, but we're going to have an engine right about right here. Transmission. Drive shaft. That's the rear. And up here you're going to have another engine block. Another transmission.
It doesn't much look like a transmission.
And the drive shaft. Okay. So, first thing to understand is 1963 Olds with a 394 in it. A 394 is the old early engine. That's the old, like a 303, 324, 371, and it ended up with a 394. So that's the old style Olds engine, and then a 425 is a big block, but it's a new architecture. They first came out in 1964 with a 330, which is a small block, but as far as anything, you know, considered late Olds, like 260, 307, 330, 350, 403, and then you have the large engine, which is 400, 425, and 455. You know, aside from how wide they are up top because of the different size of that part of the block, the mounts are the same. The architecture of the block is the same. A few things actually swap over between a big block and a small block, and we've kind of covered that on another video. But what you need to understand, though, where the hang up comes in on this, why you can't just take a later model 425, 455, 350, 403, whatever, Oldsmobile engine after 64, I'll say, is because of the mounting. Alright, on this early engine, this 394, this is the front right here. Okay, I tell you what, let's do this one first. Let's do front, because everybody's more familiar with this, and I think it'll be a better effect if I do this one first. Now, this is the later model. So this is a 425, but it could be any engine, basically, any later model 350. It could be a Pontiac engine, you know, later model 350 Pontiac. So anything we're mostly familiar with, they're mounted a 3-point engine mount system. Right about right here, and this includes other divisions and other models, Ford, Mercury, a lot of them have an engine mount here that mounts into the left side of the engine, right about midway of the block. One in the same place on the passenger side, mounts in right here. You've got a mounting pad somewhere under here for that, and then back here at the back of the transmission you have a cross member, and you have a mounting pad right back here at the rear, or it may be kind of under it, but that's your 3-point mounting system. It's like an inverted T. So where the difference comes in, where the architecture, the mounting architecture is different on the 394 and the 371 and the 324 and the 303, is up front you don't have mounts on the side right here, not right in this area. You have one single mount that's under the front, under the harmonic balancer, that mounts right here, and then your other two mounts are back here almost in line with the crankshaft flange. You have extension coming out right here, and you've got like a little frame reinforcement, you know, like that, and that's where it mounts. And on these also, actually, the block is part of the torque converter housing, so your transmission is more along the lines of just this part from right here back. If you ever look at one, you'll understand. But that's your T is no longer inverted. You got two side mounts here and one front mount. There is no mount back here. Now, I think the drive shaft on this one may not have a center mount in it, but now I say there's no mount back here. There could be. I've not been, you know, as long as I've owned that Oldsmobile, that 63, I've never been far enough under that car to actually verify that. Now, it may actually have 4 mounts, but I know for a fact it's got these 2. So where this comes in at is you don't have, on the early car, which I have, you do not have provisions to mount the later model engine here on the midway through the block. Now, if you did, or you make mounts, you construct mounts, which you certainly can do, then you can ignore this front mount. But then again, you have to come up with a way to mount the newer engine and transmission back here someplace. So you're going to have to add in a cross member where there is none right now, as far as I know there's not. So it's not, there is no drop-in There is no drop in the engine for it. The only thing that drops right back into it's another 394, 371, another early Olds. So that's the only thing that drops in. Otherwise, you have to pull the engine. That's why I'm saying I may have to pull the engine transmission totally out and just store it, you know, and just ignore it. Now, I said I want to try to get that engine running, and I'm not going to give up on it if it can be done easily. But, you know, as I said, they're expensive. They're expensive to overhaul. There's only a limited amount of aftermarket parts for them. Well, I mean, there's enough to rebuild them, but, you know, and that transmission that's behind it, that's called a, I know some of you have heard of a Hydra-Matic transmission. Well, Hydra-Matic, let me explain a little bit about Hydra-Matic. Hydra-Matic started out, it was a division. They called the first division that made automatic transmissions for General Motors was called the Hydra-Matic division of General Motors, and that's what they did, is they built transmissions. They built from about 1930, what was it, 39, 38, somewhere in there, when they, or 40, whenever it was, they came out with the first self-shifting automatic General Motors transmission, which was called simply a Hydra-Matic transmission, and it was a 4-speed transmission, 4-speed automatic, which it was not overdrive. So if you hear 4-speed, don't think it had overdrive. It didn't. The highest ratio was just 1-to-1, but it had like a couple of short gears, and then it had a longer third gear and even longer fourth gear, but it was still 1-to-1. Now that transmission was a 4-speed. It was what was called a fluid coupling transmission, which means it did not have a torque converter. So there's no torque converter. I think that 4-speed version, the early version, had 2 pumps on it. It had a front pump and a rear pump. Those cars, you could actually push start them, because if you pushed it, it turned the rear pump and it would actually turn the engine. So just like some of the early torque flights transmissions and Mopars. But so that was that, and that transmission was used up through the mid 1960s. I think one of the last cars that used that transmission was possibly a 1963 Cadillac, maybe a Pontiac also. But along the line in there, about 1961, Oldsmobiles started using a simplified 3-speed version of that transmission. It was no longer a 4-speed, it was a 3-speed version. They call it a Slim Jim, but its official name was, get this, I know you're going to laugh at this, but it's called a Roto, R-O-T-O, Hydra-Matic. Roto Hydra-Matic. Now, why they called it a Roto Hydra-Matic, I don't know, but they did. So anyway, for all intents and purposes, it more or less worked the same way as the old one, the old Hydra-Matic did, but it didn't have a rear pump, and it was only a 3-speed. And those things shift weird, and I really want to use that one out there because I want to experience that firsthand. I want to see how that thing works. They say they don't shift very well, but that presents a problem, because that is also, like I said, that is also a fluid coupling transmission, which a fluid coupling means that it has a device that sort of functions like a torque converter, but it's not necessary. It does not multiply torque. It just basically means that one part rotates and the other part is driven to rotate by fluid in there. So there is no torque converter per se. Now, where that comes in to be a problem is that on that old car out there, that engine is seized up tighter than Dick's hat band. It will not turn. So that's the problem, because that coupling is inside where the torque converter goes. You can get to it from the outside. You can access it, but the problem therein is that if the engine won't turn, you can't access all the bolts to separate the engine and the transmission. Because I've not seen one of those couplings, but it's just basically, take my word for it, it's a basic coupling in there with bolts running through it. So if you can't rotate the crankshaft to get to all the bolts, how in the world are you going to get the thing unbolted? So we're up against 2 obstacles here as far as that engine and transmission goes. So So that's why I'm not really, during the winter at least, I'm not really been too fired up to do anything with that, because you know, you're potentially running into a lot of money if one of those does. We know the engine's possibly junk, but if the transmission no longer works, then that's, you know, I know already I can rebuild a transmission, but that one, I don't know, because more or less these days, to get one of those Hydra-Matics built, you have to go find the old master who knows how to do it, or somebody who's had the information, who's trained under the old master that knows how to rebuild one. There ain't that many people who can do them anymore. So anyway, that's the story, and that's why, you know, if you hear references in my videos to I say, well, I'm still thinking about it, I hadn't decided yet. Well, that's the truth. I haven't decided yet, because here's what bottom line is, I don't want that car to sit out there and sit like it has been. It's been sitting too long, but you know, I'm afraid that I'm just going down a dead-end road trying to find another running engine, because there are not many running engines anymore that anybody wants to sell. If they sell one, it's because it's already blown up, or it's going to be blown up, or they're selling a rebuilt engine that is about $6,000 or $7,000. So what I'm thinking is, you guys have asked this in different videos, but what I'm considering the route that I'm going to take is, I think I'm just going to go ahead and pull the old drivetrain out of it, and we will spend some time looking at that old engine, because I know I've gotten into this, and I don't want to let you guys down. I know y'all are looking forward to that, so we will see what we can do with that old 394. I'd like to use it, but ultimately, if it comes down to me trying to find the money and the time and the ability to rebuild all that and put it back in, or putting another engine in that car so we can just drive it and finally use it, then I'm going to put another engine in it. That's all I'm going to do, because, you know, and I'm probably considering, you can still find Oldsmobile and Buick and Pontiac engines and Cadillac engines pretty cheap. You know, these stupid ass garage shows have kind of ruined people on stuff. They think everything they got now is worth much more than it is, but really the way to buy something like this is you find an Olds 98 or 88 or Pontiac something, you know, sedan that nobody wants for any other reason except a running engine and transmission, and you buy the thing cheap once you verify you know, it's a good engine. So, you know, and there again, you know, it's yeah but, and I hate to keep saying that, because it's mostly my own fault and nobody else's, but you know, that comes into a logistical thing about this where I live here, that, you know, I have to play my cards right to be able to bring in a old car like that and get it in where it's not going to infuriate one of these goody neighbors here with me tearing an engine out of a car, because that's just the way they are here. I've said this, and I know nobody to blame but me. You know, I am where I am, and you know, that's it for right now. So we'll see on this what's going to happen, but I've not forgot about it, and I hope that this kind of explains a little bit more about the things to do with that car. And if any of you have any ideas, you know, or you have a lead on an engine or a car, feel free to share it. But you know, I don't hold much hope for another one of these, because like I said, there are just not many out there anymore. Those cars were not, except for like a Starfire convertible, all the rest of them were not desirable, and they rusted out, got junked a long time ago. So, but let me know if you know about anything. I'd appreciate it. So, thanks for watching, and have you a real good evening. See ya.